Well, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. We're so excited for yet another episode. We actually have one of our partner associations on with us and their executive director, Tammy Rimes. Welcome to the podcast. How would you want to introduce yourself today?
Oh, that's easy. Actually, I always start out and tell people I'm a recovering purchasing agent. I
Yeah,
was the former purchasing director for the city of San Diego, the ninth largest city. But since my retirement there, I've transitioned and become the executive director for the National Cooperative Procurement Partners. It's an association, and TIPS is a member of that association, and we work on that topic called cooperative procurement.
yeah. So that's great. That's what we're talking about today, and we're going to get into a lot of your advocacy and education and things like that. But for you particularly, Tammy, what exactly does your role look like at NCPP?
Yeah. So, as executive director, I sort of facilitate a lot of our activities, but it kind of fits, I call it into three buckets. So, the first bucket is education, and we do a lot of education, the 101 level to the advanced level on that topic for cooperatives, but we do it on both sides of the procurement table. So, we teach government and educational institution public procurement folks, and then we also teach suppliers on how to introduce that contract into the sales conversation. So that's bucket one. Bucket two is legislative advocacy, and we monitor legislation across all 50 states on proposed legislation that might help or hurt the use of co ops, and we represent our members there. And then the third bucket is called collaboration, where we work on special projects that support the entire industry. And what I love about NCPP is we have a 360 membership. We have cooperatives, we have suppliers with cooperative contracts. In that third group, 20,000 public procurement and government employees. So on any given day, we're conducting activities to support all three groups.
Absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, uh we travel a lot at TIPS for conferences or things like that. You may be one of the only people out there who travel more than me. and and you're out doing a lot of public speaking with that educational aspect, or going to conferences, or just out there connecting with those 20,000 different agencies, right? So
Sure.
how long have you been doing that? How long has it been since you kind of came on with the NCPP
Yeah.
mission, so to speak?
Yeah, I actually got introduced to NCPP about 10 years ago, and it was through the education effort. And I was invited to do some webinars because NCPP was just getting started. Over time, I
Yeah.
really loved the mission of the organization. So when the opportunity arose, I came on almost 10 years ago as executive director and absolutely love what I do.
That's awesome. You know, I know before you were doing this, you were doing some other public speaking events, and you also
Yes.
had things like a winery and things like that. Can you go into that a little bit of history for
Oh
the
my gosh,
people? Because
you just
that's,
messed
I
up
mean,
the rest of the interview. Everybody's going to want to talk about wine instead of cooperative
I know.
procurement now.
Well, that helps procurement, right?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So,
So actually,
so
my while I was working at the city of San Diego, my husband and I had a dream. I actually wanted to raise horses, and you see all the horse stuff behind me. Horses are my passion. But
mhm.
he wanted, once we bought our property, he had the idea to grow grapes. And I still remember his words, for fun. We were growing them for fun. But once you have grapes, you want to make wine. So he went and got trained at UC Davis in California to do the winemaking. And in the end, we ended up opening a small family winery called Hacienda de las Rosas. And we combined my love of horses, his love of the wine, and we actually we had a golden horse on every bottle, and all the wine was named after my horses. Or once I run out of them, after my friends' horses. And so we had a very successful tasting room in Old Town San Diego for about 10 years. So, yeah, wine was a big part of our life. Horses were a big part. And I wrote a book called Drink Fine Wine, Ride Fine Horses. And so that's how I started my keynote speaking, was based on that book and our family experience.
Yeah. And that message, if I remember, if I'm saying this wrong, Tim, you tell me, but that
Go
message was
ahead.
essentially, uh, don't be afraid to chase the dream. No matter what the
Exactly.
excuses
That was the whole
are.
message.
I mean, yeah, whatever the excuses are, whatever age, limitation,
Right.
location, chase your dream,
Oh,
right?
I'm a big believer in that Nike logo. Just do it. Just do it.
And I say all of this to make an exaggerated point of that ties hand in hand with public procurement because
Sure.
for everyone listening, for everyone who will listen, uh, it takes grit to handle public procurement,
It
and
does.
sometimes you just got to do it. Yeah, you know,
Exactly. No, you're
sometimes.
right. I worked 26 years in the city, many jobs, and procurement was my last job. I always tell people it was the most difficult job I ever had. With that said, it was also my most favorite job because it was all about problem solving and we were in the
Yes.
mix of every single thing our entity was doing. And I just love being part of the action.
Oh yeah. And see some people, if they're brand new, I mean, what do you mean it takes grit? Well, have you ever had to say no to the mayor? Have you ever had to say? Have you ever
Great
had to say,
example.
let's go out to go, they want to buy from their uncle who is the fencing contractor in their town, and or maybe the fire chief went to some trade show and now wants to incorporate some new measure
You
for the
got it.
city or schools. I mean, it trust me, trust me, it takes
Right.
grit,
And on any
and
given day, there's an emergency. And I know when you say the word emergency, they think fire, flood, accidents, and all of that is true. Procurement's dealing, but it's leaky roof in a classroom. It's,
uh-huh.
the janitorial staff didn't show up and there's no toilet paper in the bathrooms. These are all real emergencies too.
Right, right. So that just perfectly incorporates into what I believe NCPP is doing, and you guys are doing a lot of advocacy. You guys are doing a
Right.
lot of resources. There's things like your roadmap. I think there's even an RFP cost estimator.
Right.
What are some of those tools that NCPP is putting out that you might want to highlight for people today?
Sure. Sure. The first thing, and I'll always have my purchasing hat whenever I look at any situation. So to me, cooperative procurement is just another tool to use. Is it the only tool? No, you still are going to have to issue some bids and RFPs.
Right.
However, in certain circumstances, it makes sense to go with a cooperative contract. So before you piggyback or use anybody's contract, a state, a cooperative, the agency down the road, you still need to conduct some due diligence questions. So what we did for NCPP is we reached out to procurement managers across the country and said, so before you piggyback on a contract, what are those due diligence questions that you ask about your own agency, about the supplier, the cooperative, and the contract? And we put those all together into a roadmap for a cooperative strategy, which you can download for free off the website. In fact, I highly recommend you, when you check out the NCPP website, click on that education tab, and all of this free information will drop down. We also have a Mythbusters piece. So when some department pushes back, or your manager or even your legal counsel tells you something about co-ops that you don't quite think is right, the Mythbusters might give you the right talking points to counter those points they're making.
Right. And so, in summary, what are agencies maybe getting wrong when it comes to incorporating a cooperative procurement that you're seeing out there that they can look out for?
Yeah. So one of the thing is to broaden your mindset because, and I'll age myself here, but back when I first started using co-ops, it was mostly commodities, well-defined widgets with very specific specifications and scope of work. But that world is wide open now with co-ops. There's a lot of services contract. In fact, there's procurement services contracts you can
Oh,
use if you are short staffed. So you look into the services category. A lot of our suppliers have gotten really savvy and helpful in that now they're bundling a commodity purchase with the installation and delivery. So, for perfect example, is playground equipment. I mean, they can
right.
deliver it on the pallets out there on the field, but I don't know how to put together playground equipment. I want them to take care of everything: the permitting, the grading, bringing in the wood chips, whatever you need to do. I want to finish playground at the end of the day. So again, there's a packaging and bundling. And then the last component, some people are a little timid into going into the construction area. And again, you need to check your own state statutes on whether you can use
Yes.
co-op for construction, but where you can, I highly recommend it. Particularly for small repair projects, quick resurfacing of a basketball court in the 2 weeks when the kids aren't at school, resurfacing paving, parking lots, all of those kind of things can be quickly taken care of through co-ops, which a bid process is going to take you months and months. And now you're either past the fiscal year or past the timeline is when you actually had to get this work done.
Absolutely. And like you said, when you first started, it was primary commodities and things like that, and then as it's progressed into service construction, guys, it's grown so much. Just the internal example, right, of things moving from commodity to include services and install, and then to construction. You know, Tips have created its own division of people that are now our subject matter experts for construction purchase orders alone, where we're
Right.
completing those pricing verifications and doing all that. We have our own construction procurement summit, right?
Yeah.
Tammy, you were there, right? And that's not. I'm
And
not
that's
trying to pat.
amazing. You guys are
Oh
ahead
yeah.
of the curve. That was an amazing conference.
Well, we have roughly 20 people at Tips alone just dedicated to verifying the construction PO. And
Right.
they're doing that day in, day out. Sometimes they're 2 days lagged behind. I mean, that's how much agencies are using construction in today's world, especially I call it the post-COVID world,
Right.
because that's when things they took off before that, but that's when the wildfire exploded because
Right.
when the city couldn't go into their offices and use their secure, on-site only bidding, it did kind of force this movement that was already growing from since
Right.
I'd say 2010. It just exploded from there, right?
Yeah,
So,
definitely open the door, particularly for
oh yeah,
agencies who hadn't explored it in the past, or maybe their legal counsel was reticent about it, but now you're stuck at home and you still need to buy all that stuff. So it's
oh
like,
yeah,
hey, and then once you try the cooperative route, you can't go back to closing that gate and saying, we'll never do that again, particularly once you've had some great successes with it.
right. And if it's a valid contract, right?
Sure.
If it's done right and all the due diligence is in place, it's almost like the question I'm always asking procurement officials, business officers, whatever I'm out in the road.
Right.
Why would you not? It's like
Exactly. Why would you not do
it's
this? If I have to tell you, the first time I used it, I'm like, no way, it can't be this
no
easy.
way.
Am I going to
Yeah,
get arrested for this? But in the end, once I conducted all my due diligence, all the boxes were checked. It's like, shoot, why wouldn't I use this contracting methodology?
yeah. Another one I hear out in the field is, well, the cooperative is just trying to take my job.
Yeah.
No, we're not. You are still in charge of your financial or fiscal
Right.
responsibility, however you say it in your state, right? We're helping you streamline your responsibilities within your agency.
True.
That's all we're trying to do, right?
It's to
And
drive us it's to drive cost savings and efficiencies, but it also helps in respect, and I love this because one of the things in a procurement director, we hate to see a sole source request come in. It makes me nervous because it's generally from a department who wants what they want when they want it, so they have chosen this supplier. But when I do a quick Google search, lo and behold, there's 10 other companies that order either the same or a similar product. So it's very hard for me in procurement to justify that decision.
oh
However,
yeah.
my customer wants what he wants when he wants it. So if I can go to that supplier and say, hey, do you have a state contract, a cooperative contract? I can still reach you, but I just need a contracting vehicle to do that. So to me, that alleviates the strain on procurement, having to do all the research on a sole source. Instead, you're
Yes.
going on a competitively solicited, awarded contract instead, and to me, that's more defendable.
And so, with someone looking into this maybe for the first time, or tips and tricks for a seasoned veteran, whichever, you're out in the market, like I said, talking to these people and have that almost heartbeat kind of feel to it.
Sure.
What are some of those best practices to then incorporate that for a school board or for the attorney, or what are
Sure.
people most likely to present on Cooperative so they should then know about it?
Yeah. So the first thing is to start with research. And I know you might roll your eyes with that and said, when will I have time for that? Well, you got to make time because in the end it will pay off. So there's different ways to research. You can pick one co-op, just pick one and research them to death. Research their process, how they do their lead agency model, or how do they run their solicitations. Look at their contracts. And then once you're satisfied with their process and you feel like that's okay with you, now look at all the contract offerings and then start comparing that with your upcoming expiring contracts and line it up. I'm not ever going to go out to bid for office supplies. It's been done 100 times over. I'm just going to go look for the contract, which leads to me to my second. If you are looking at a category, let's say MRO, office supplies, vehicles, heavy equipment, then maybe go reach out to those big suppliers in that market. That's what I did with office supplies and said, hey, I'm interested in buying office supplies. Tell me what cooperative contracts you have, because that's the route I'm going. And then I had them do the pricing of my market basket. So there's a lot of approaches to how to go to it, but just get started on that research. The other thing is you might want to start educating, particularly if it's a first time you're bringing one of these contracts before a board or city council. Start talking to their chiefs of staff. That's what I did, and educate them. So when the question comes up, what kind of contract is this? Why didn't we go out to bid? You quickly have your talking points ready to go, or you've already kind of pre-marketed the idea of cooperative. So it's a little bit easier selling to get your votes, to get out of there and get your votes.
Right. Yeah. And, I love how you mentioned something that, you know, I saw a stat the other day. I was at another conference, right? But by and large, this is the youngest generation of public procurement people
Sure.
that we've seen in 40 years. A lot of people retired, some as early as COVID, even. And so now there's this up and coming generation of public procurement officers who are needing all the tricks of the trade, so to
Right.
speak. And you said it, and it's just brilliant because this was also something they brought up was you're not just keeping track of the bids you're putting out. You are keeping track. Some people even have a separate calendar of when are my bids expiring,
Right.
right? Because at a minimum, you should probably be going out to bid 90 days prior to
At a
before that
minimum.
vendor, even if, and that's if you're going out to bid yourself, right?
Right.
So what we've seen is a lot of agencies are using a cooperative means of procurement to maintain continuity
Right.
across all their systems, right? And it's easy for office supplies, right? But when
Sure.
you've got dozens of buildings and your HVAC goes down,
Right.
a big problem is when, okay, well, who worked on that? Who do I have the warranty with? Who do I have?
Right.
To where if you can get with a trusted supplier and then use that cooperative contract, you can now begin to maintain continuity. So it's almost, the Ghostbusters. Okay, when this happens, who am I going to call? Right? And so so you can maintain continuity with your cooperative
Sure.
contracts, but you need to stay ahead of when bids might be expiring at your local level to
Right.
do that. So
Right.
all good practices, right?
Exactly. And you have to realize these cooperative contracts are awarded to serve many. So they're usually
Right.
regional or national contracts. So they include so many more choices and SKUs than your own individual bid ever would. So let's think in technology. There's so much stuff being invented and refined all the time. If I did a technology bid today and awarded it in 6 months, it's already obsolete. There's things not in my bid that I should have had, but I didn't know they weren't going to be invented. So sometimes
Right.
you can work with a broader contract to kind of pick and choose. I want this drone that just came out, and I need this new laptop with this specification. Particularly if you work for higher ed and you're working with faculty that are into research or students bodies that you're having to support, it's hard to always be cutting edge when you're using traditional procurement processes.
Yes. Another thing that I had a purchaser friend of mine do, they use tips, so that's how we know each other, right? But they have 3 meetings a year that revolve around their fiscal year, right?
Oh, nice.
And so they're in education. So in August, when they're doing in service and getting ramped up again and on all that, they're meeting with department heads and they have a procurement meeting on what is this year's budget, what are some things that you might have learned about, and they're trying to actively communicate and almost press their department heads. Hey, what's getting innovated in the athletics department this year, or what's a new innovation for our one-to-one technology or our network or IT,
Sure.
or even up to, okay, curriculum, is there any standards that are changing? Are we going to have to buy new textbooks coming up? I need to
Exactly.
know these things, right? Because generally, this is a very, very broad statement, and sometimes it's not the case. But generally, if you have your ear to the ground, so to speak, you have about a 24-month warning
Sure.
before major purchases have to be made, oftentimes by like legislation, right?
Right.
And they have that generally at the beginning of the fiscal year, one third through the fiscal year, right before summer begins, right? So every 4 months,
Wow.
the
That's
procurement
pretty
director
proactive.
is being very proactive to say what's coming down the pipe. What's the budget look like this year? Are we going to incorporate that into the next 2 years? I don't know, but you need to be proactive, right?
Right. I
Prevention
agree.
is
It
always
it
better than
makes
an
your life
emergency.
easier. It
It
takes a lot of
does.
time to be proactive, but I'm a big believer in meeting with at least your larger customer departments that have
Yeah,
more spend, more of the big projects. Meet with police and fire and all, and they're not necessarily going to invite you to their meetings. Invite yourself to their meetings
right.
with the understanding that I can provide so much better customer service if I have a clue what's going on in advance.
Absolutely. And, oftentimes, because I came from the Medicare side of procurement before tips, but oftentimes we're seen as the Debbie Downers, you know, wait, we can't quite, or we gotta, and so, honestly, and I mean, Tips's tagline is purchasing made personal. So it's kind of our mantra. But again, the human aspect of this is what we're doing is you're working with people. And
Yeah,
so the more that you can have a personal relationship with those departments, I would say the better,
yeah,
because it's a lot easier to work with a friend than someone who's seen as the no person. And oftentimes we do have to present the professional no or the
yeah,
professional, let's wait and figure this out first, right? You got to master that a little bit, but it becomes a lot easier if you can get out of the cubicle, so to speak, and go
sure.
meet with these people on their terms and be a part of that process. So that's always something I'm always just saying. Look, this has nothing to do with cooperative purchasing. However, we
Right,
can have those interdepartment relationships.
right.
So we just talked about a bunch of different tips and tricks, but when when all of this comes together, I guess from the NCPP answer, when we have suppliers working together, departments working together, the cooperative contract is being put in place, how efficient have we kind of proven that to be, or it doesn't have to be metrics, but what do you see happening compared to the traditional bid, Timmy?
So I always feel like procurement needs to have several different options. So bids and RFPs are clearly one of those options. You've got thresholds and P card purchases. So the more tools you have to work with, the better for you to be able to pivot and be flexible. But for this industry, one of the biggest things is to consider your time. Your
Yeah.
time is money. It's also very limited. So the work is going to continue to come in, even as all of these cities and counties and municipalities are tightening their belt this year. A lot of them are facing budget restrictions, but that never means a work slowdown for procurement. We still need to keep up with all of the work coming in. So the only way that to do that is to use all those multiple tools. So NCPP actually did a study under that bucket called collaboration, where we had real entities volunteer from across the US, and they track their time, not only their time, but their subject matter experts, their evaluation team, their legal counsel, their city council, all of those folks from start to finish for an awarded contract. And what we found is that time is money too. So for a simple, non-complex, just buy that widget and get it, you need to tack on at minimum another $1,600 on top of whatever item you just purchased, because that's the time. That's the average. It could be more. So think a $7,000 lawnmower. Yes, you could go out to bid and you probably could beat cooperative pricing. Let's say you beat it by 500 bucks, but you got to tack on 1,600 bucks at the end because that was your time. For
Mhm.
complex, it jumps exponentially. On average, tack on another $17,000 on top, and it could be higher for more complex, higher dollar value construction, installation services, labor components. So just realize that your time is money too, and that should be part of your decision making.
Right, and that is the NCPP RFP tracking project. You can
Correct.
Google that. You can search it on their website.
Yep.
I think the full report is what, 18 pages or
Yep,
something
so
like
we
that,
have a
close
full
to 20.
report. Yeah, we have a full report with all of the data. We actually had a academia, the University of Georgia, review it because we wanted arm's length and had academia review this. But we also have a two-page dashboard that you can actually use as justification when you get that question. So why didn't we go out to bid for this? Well, let me show you this report and how much extra this lawnmower would have cost us.
Right. And I always, there's indexes out there that are called cost of living indexes.
Right,
I've had people do that because those numbers, that's $1,600 for a standard commodity, simple RFP, right, all the way up to over tenfold for
right,
construction. Those are national averages across
right,
all the ones that they were able to participate in and things like that. And there's these things publicly available called a cost of living index. You plug that average into that cost of living index, and you actually have a truer
right,
re- by zip code almost,
right,
depending on which one you
right.
use.
Yeah.
And I've had people do that. I've had people in St. Louis do that. I had people in Roswell, New Mexico do that. I had people do that to
Oh,
where it's
that's
like,
very
oh,
cool.
well, our true number actually
Right,
is even
right.
higher, or because again, that's the average.
Yeah,
And then with that same report, they tracked the dollarly amount of essentially what they were paying in salary to these subject matter experts, procurement team, legal, right, Tammy? But then you have, what was that actual hours spent, right? And I think for the small commodities, it was around 80 hours, and then the larger one, as the average was well over 100.
sure.
You know that offhand? I mean,
Yeah, and what we found also, what was interesting, kind of an aha moment for me, is for we always think this pull is on procurement only, and for non-complex, easy purchases, you're right. Mostly procurement's involved, but once we go complex, we're pulling in our subject matter experts from the departments, evaluation teams. We're having interviews. We're doing a lot more stuff. Our facilities folks are involved, so the
right.
pull is actually more on the other departments, and they were never trained in procurement. Procurement's not even part of their job, but they have to be involved to get what they need. So it's really a big pull on the whole organization, not just procurement. So you need to think broadly about how is this affecting our entity and not just my little team.
And I mean, it's very powerful. That two pager or front and back, if you print it out, is great. Most often the lawyers might want that full, almost 20-page report. That's what I've found,
Right.
at least, Tammy. Well, I share that across the
Or
nation for
data
you.
junkies.
Right. Well, yeah, I read it. I read it when it first came out, but I'm the data junkie guy, right? So, well, because I wanted to understand it. I like understanding things.
Sure.
So, you know, where do you see, we talked about kind of the upcoming trends of things moving just from commodities out. Next 5 to 10 years, what does NCPP hope to do, but where do you see the entire public purchasing industry, is what I'll call it for lack of a better term?
Sure.
Where do you see that going with all of this advocacy and reach out that you guys are doing?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it earlier on is just the change in personnel. The younger folks coming in, they grew up with the internet. They grew up with Amazon. So they just put things
Yes.
in in a grocery cart and check out and it's delivered the next day. Now they get to public procurement for the first time and it's like, "Oh my gosh, am I in the 19th century? Why are we doing it this way?" So I think the younger generation is going to save us because they are going to say, why are we doing that? I get accountability. I get open competition. I get all the concepts, but why are we doing it this way? So I have a feeling more and more is going to move into streamlining, into using cooperative contracts. As a result, the cooperative industry, they grow based on the demand of clients. So when these clients start, do you have a contract in ABC? And they don't, now the co-op's going to get active in filling those gaps. So I really see a lot of gap filling over the next few
Sure.
years and even specialty things like, DNA testing for police departments, things that wouldn't be your typical cooperative contract, but now they're starting to look for opportunities or gaps in between. So that's a big one. So services, construction, there is legislation being passed as our legislators start to get educated on this as well. Some of them, surprisingly, when I testify before state legislators, I am actually surprised that many of them started at the local level, a local school district, or
Mhm.
they were a mayor of a small town. And many of them are savvy to the benefits of cooperatives. And now they get elevated to the state level and they're looking at the state legislation and they're like, why aren't we allowed to use this? I was using this back in my hometown. So we're
Right.
seeing certain states, so Louisiana just opened up,
Yes.
Idaho, there's states that are opening up to cooperative, which helps political subdivision. So I do see it opening up more. We also have to be careful with this very powerful tool. We want to make sure you still conduct your due diligence. You just don't automatically piggyback on a contract and you think that's okay. If you're using federal funding, grant funds, you still need to make sure that all's in
Tammy.
compliance and you still need to check those boxes. So while I am a big believer in co-ops, I would never drink the Kool-Aid on any one contracting tool. I still want to be open-minded and do my research. So that would be my only caveat because in the end, you never want a bad procurement story in the news. And we normally don't hear those good stories, but we never want to be associated with the bad ones. So I'm just telling you, just make sure you do your research, your due diligence, but this is a great resource for you.
Yeah. Back on that federal stuff, everyone always gets frustrated with me when they ask me direct questions about it. But, the cooperatives can only do so much in regards to all kinds of things with Edgar or 2 CFR 200 or
Sure.
you name it, wherever the money's coming from, right? Grants,
Right.
what have you. There are some stipulations, right? It's just a quick example to someone who
Right.
might have not experienced this. There are some stipulations that can only be completed by the agency who has received that funds. For
Right.
instance, if you receive an agricultural grant, you cannot buy the high school new football uniforms with that money, right? There would be no way for a cooperative to know about that stipulation, to enforce that stipulation. However, it's in the, we'll call it terms and conditions of your funding
Sure.
that you now have violated a part of that federal funding, not the procurement part, but the allocation parts of it.
Right.
That's a very silly example, but that's the stuff that's happening in the real world. So
Sure.
most cooperatives out there have done everything they can to prepare for a federal funded project, right?
Right.
But there are still things that must be done at your level to make sure that it's all coming together. And
Right.
that's where the public purchasers on their state municipality or their school district, that's where you still have your part to play. And just like Tammy said, the research, the due diligence, does this money need to be allocated in a particular way? Was
Right.
there something with this college endowment that we can only use it for certain things
Right.
or you name it, right? So
Right. No, these
those
are
are
all good
very
points. Like
yes.
I said, procurement was my most difficult job ever, but it was my favorite job.
Yeah. And I think really, I mean, that's the thing is you learn to love it. I always love the challenge. I always love the discussion of is this going to work? Does this fit the scope of work and in our world and all this different stuff? And I've learned to love it, right? But what helps with that a lot, and I think as we kind of wrap things up towards the close here, is it helps to have partners like NCPP,
Yep.
like all of these associations and memberships where we're, they might host a trade show for continuing education and things like that. And I know Tammy recently, at the time of recording this, like we met up at the NIGP summit and you've partnered with NIGP on some other things as well. Can you maybe mention a few from the government side, a few from the education side, maybe non-profit? I don't know. Can
Yeah,
you maybe talk about what you've done with NIGP and then maybe mention some other organizations out there
of
for
course.
the support, you know?
Right. So, as I mentioned at the start of this, we represent cooperative procurement, but there's so
Right.
many associations out there that represent that bigger pie called public procurement. So, we want to align ourselves with excellence in public procurement, knowing that cooperatives is just one slice of that pie. So, NIGP, we have MOUs with several associations, including the National Purchasing Institute, which hosts the Achievement and Excellence Award, with UPPCC, who does certifications, the CPPO, CPPB certifications, New York SAMPO. That we recently signed an MOU with TEXPA. We have one with CAPO in California, FAPO in Florida, but NIGP is probably our biggest procurement. Oh, and in Canada as well. We are affiliated with associations up there. But NIGP, we have a really close relationship where we are considered the strategic advisor for co-ops. So we're working right now on a class this year for the first time to be unveiled the day before forum starts in Columbus, Ohio. We're going to be doing a certification class just in cooperative procurement. We also partner on webinars with NIGP and those other associations I mentioned. So it is a source for you if you're already an NIGP member or a member of those other associations. We're constantly partnering to bring in education. And when I say education, I try to be real careful when I present. I want it to be agnostic. I want it to be skill set focused so that back in the day when I was listening to cooperative procurement trainings, they were either offered by a co-op, which makes sense, but
Yep.
magically, all yellow brick roads led to that one co-op, and I'm like, "I kinda need general
Right.
information." Or we'd have a procurement person teaching, and while they might be good, their information might be dated, or they might be focused, they live in Arizona, so they're just talking about Arizona-focused laws and regulations. Well, I'm in California, so this doesn't really relate to me, so we
Right.
really strive to make sure our education's agnostic and real takeaways. Like, I don't want fluff. I want stuff that you can use in the job. So that might be where NCPP can play a role. And membership is free to public procurement government folks. So you can sign up for free and have access to everything.
Yeah, that's great. So get involved, surround yourself with excellence. I love how you said that because that's what can truly make the difference,
Sure.
especially as fast as public procurement may be changing, still grounded in all the things that protect the
Sure.
public dollar.
Yep.
However, things are changing and they're changing fast. And we need to be, purchasing is the tip of the spear when it comes to cutting that PO.
I
So,
like to call us the hub of the universe. We are all powerful, all knowing.
our self appointed hub of the universe. I love
Exactly.
that.
Why not?
So, no, but honestly and truly, as this fits in and as the cooperative purchasing fits into the public space, it truly is better serving the public by making um, your process more streamlined, more efficient, less public waste, right? And with all the data points and things we talked about, like with the RFP tracking point, that's something that then you can take to those board meetings or the
Right.
city hall or wherever you may have to go and speak to the public. Those are things that you can do to give that the public the peace of mind, which is your main underlying job anyway, right?
Sure.
So, Tammy, in closing, is there anything else that you'd like to add on those points, or anything else where they might find you? I know we've mentioned the website before, but just
Yeah.
in closing, have at it, Tammy.
So the cooperative world is changing rapidly. Every time I go to an exhibit hall, I'm like, where did that co-op come from? Are they new? So I just wanted to caveat that once you research a couple of co-ops and you decided they're your go-to A and B, don't stop there because they change over the years. Their contract offerings grow over the years. But then
Yeah.
there's other co-ops down that you may never have tried before. Constantly be researching because it just makes you all that more knowledgeable and powerful as a purchasing person. You can bring solutions rather than just hearing about everybody's problems at those events.
Right. All right. Well, thank you again, Tammy, for being on
Yeah,
with us today and sharing what NCP is doing and talking about kind of the scope for cooperatives in the past, present, future. I feel like.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you again for listening this far. We want to say if you have listened to us and found this helpful, please subscribe to the podcast. We'd love to have you on as we're posting weekly content just like this. And if you want to join TIPS, it's entirely free for public agencies. We're servicing over 14,000 now agencies across the country who are utilizing these tools to streamline their procurement process. And if you're a vendor out there and want to then service those public agencies, well, we'll put something up on the screen where you can find the instructions on how to respond to one of our publicly sealed bids. And you can respond and hopefully be awarded. And we'd love to work with you and show you how to work inside the public space as a vendor. We thank you again for joining, and we'll see you next time on the Purchasing Made Personal podcast.